Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Welcome to Lanterna's Autumn Retreat, at home with the Beloved, at home with the Prophet, the household of the Beloved. We are so excited to have all of you here tonight. Our session tonight will be called Perfection of Character, and we will delve into the character of the Prophet, our beloved, who we try to emulate in every way. I was reading a hadith that I wanted to share, and the spirit of it went back to what I had said earlier, that everyone who is meant to be here was chosen by Allah, and that whatever we gain in this weekend is from Allah, and there's no doubt about that. The reality of knowledge is such that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, knowledge is not acquired through extensive learning, rather it is the light that God sends in the heart of whomever he wishes to guide. Like Shahinati was telling me earlier, Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim. It's Allah who guides. And now it is our job as students, this is part of our worship, that we are meant to open our hearts and be ready to receive whatever it is that Allah is sending to us. We thought it appropriate to begin tonight with the beautiful description of what this weekend is all about and the spirit behind it, that we had also written in our Eventbrite. And that is the words of Hajj Hisham. So I would like to read that to you tonight so that we can orient ourselves to what this weekend is all about, so we can really internalize these words. Verily you are of a noble nature. This is from Surah Al-Qalam, verse 4. This verse was occasioned by the Prophet's spontaneous response to his family at your service whenever they would call upon him. Lady Aisha was oft asked how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would conduct himself at home, and each time she answered differently, with each detail accentuating the tone, hue, contrast, tint, and sharpness of the portrait of the Prophet in her blessed heart, such that its reflection could be accurately depicted into our imaginations. In each narration, men approached her, seeking to emulate the Prophet privately as they did publicly. Men who understood well that character cannot flourish if it is not nourished, and that home is truly where the heart is. If the heart is not refined at home, then the convenient claim to outward piety amounts to seeking status in the hearts of others, which envelops one in a web of inward contradiction. Lanterna's Autumn Retreat purposes to impart such intimate knowledge of the Prophet's private life as would invite to lasting character refinement, and it all begins right at home. Light your candles in the private space of the Prophet's home life among his wives, his children, and those privileged to be in his service, that your homes be illuminated through his light. Now I would like to introduce our teacher for this weekend, Hajj Hisham Mahmood. Hisham Mahmood has studied theology, hadith, legal theory, jurisprudence, ethics, Quran recitation, and Arabic with scholars in Morocco, Mauritania, and Egypt. He has lectured internationally on the Islamic sciences and continues to read with scholars and students in the United States. Currently, Hisham is co-authoring a forthcoming work entitled A Portrait of the Prophet, as a translation of one of the most important commentaries on the personal qualities of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He has taught for more than a decade at Yale, Princeton, and Harvard universities, then left the academy to institute his own national venture, Lanterna, a non-profit educational initiative that intends through its various projects to establish learning collectives throughout the West to create decentralized communal living spaces and enrich and enhance personal practice. Currently, he resides in Pennsylvania with his wife and 2 children. And now I'd like to welcome Haj Hisham Ahmed.
صلى الله على محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم 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 صلى الله محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد سيد الأولين والآخرين وعلى صحابته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين والعاقبة للمتقين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين بك يا فتاح يا عليم. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. The Prophet ﷺ understood his own advent in the world, his own calling to the creation in the following words that really sum up everything that he came to bring. And he said, "Innama," and that's already calling our attention. Innama pretty much enters us into the one reason that he was sent. He says, "Innama bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq." I was not sent except for one thing. I was only sent into the world for one purpose, and that is to perfect the noble virtues of character. That's the entire affair for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Of course, part of that means to teach Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because character cannot be refined and it cannot be rarefied unless it is rendered. The person renders his soul or her soul and her heart to it. So the teaching of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part and parcel of good character. And in fact, it's where good character begins and it's where good character ends, right? So this is not his teaching good character or his coming to perfect good character does not mean that this was the one reason and Tawheed or teaching the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was just an extra, right? It's part of that, okay? But he said, I came only to perfect the noble virtues of character. which means that he did not come to introduce good character into the world. He did not come to bring good character and say, everything you guys have been doing up until now, from Adam until now, is just, you guys have missed the point, right? And here I am to teach you what good character is all about, right? But he came to perfect what was already there in people. He came to perfect what was already innate. He came to perfect what was already there as inherent in people, what is in their dispositions. He came to bring it out and to adorn it and to perfect it, to show people how to actually become the very best versions of themselves, right? And to take people where they were into higher, rarefied dimensions of who they can be. Each one of us has this little character in our imagination, right? Of who we think we really are meant to be, right? Each one of us knows, and from the time that we were just children, we always had this version of ourselves that we were aspiring toward. That I know that I'm the one who's the Hafiz of the Quran. I'm the one who is the leader of the community, for example, or I'm the scholar, or I'm the one who has memorized such and such hadith, or I'm the one who has solved the problem of poverty and homelessness. I'm the one who, like, we all have this notion of who we are. From the very beginning that we came into the world, we always knew that there was some version of ourselves that we were aspiring toward, right? That we know that that's who I really am in my essence. That's who I really am in my own personal aspirations. And I know that I'm going to get there one day. In other words, you know, each one of us is the hero of our own story, in other words, right? Each one of us knows that the true essence of ourselves is actually quite heroic, is actually quite amazing, right? That this is the person that I know that I can be. He is within my grasp. She is within my grasp. And that, for what the Prophet ﷺ is coming for, he is coming to show us that truly that is within grasp. Truly that what could now be a figment of our imagination, but at one time, especially as children, was very real to us, that those are dreams that can still come true. And he shows us how to aspire to them. He shows us how to achieve them. He shows us how to realize them with what he teaches and what he exemplifies, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is why he is very dear and near to our hearts. He is closer to us than we are to ourselves. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about himself, that وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ, that we are closer to them than their own carotid artery. But the Prophet ﷺ is more entitled to your souls than you are to your very own selves. The Prophet ﷺ is more entitled to us than our souls are entitled, than we are to our very own souls. Let me quote the verse directly. النبي أولى بالمؤمنين من أنفسهم. The Prophet is more entitled to the faithful than they are to their very own souls. The Prophet is more entitled to the faithful than they are to their very own souls. And there is nothing more intimate, nothing more personal than my soul is to me. It is my own connection to consciousness. My soul is my soul is if you had to pin down the identity of a person, and we're living in an age of identity politics, but if you really want to get down to the essence of identity, right, then that is spiritual. We are all living, moving, breathing breaths of God, breaths of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not human beings on some spiritual journey. Rather, we are spiritual in essence. We are spiritual beings, only on the human leg of that journey. We're on the human leg of our journey, but we are spiritual beings through and through. And the Prophet ﷺ is more entitled to that reality of yourselves, then you are to it. Not by some hadith that we can talk about, oh, what's the authenticity of this hadith and who relates it and where is it's related and who, no, this is a verse right in the book of God that the Prophet is more entitled to you than you are to yourselves. So he is closer to us in that sense. In that sense, he is closer to us. And his sunnah is something personal. His sunnah is something so intimate. His sunnah is something that we come to know ourselves through. Because if you want to, before you go out, you look into a mirror and you make sure that you're well groomed. You look into a mirror. You make sure that there's no hot red pepper in between your teeth from the pizza that you just ate. You don't want to be embarrassed like that. So you look in the mirror. You want to make sure that when you go out, that your beard is well groomed, right? Huh? That everything that you are presented in the very, very best way. That's what the mirror does. But the soul also has a mirror. The soul also has a mirror. And that mirror is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That mirror is the example that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam left behind for us. That mirror of the soul is all we need to know. The sunnah is all we need to know in terms of what our souls need and what our souls reflect and what our souls manifest and how far the path ahead lies. Otherwise, we might become deluded into thinking that, I don't bring any harm to anybody's life, so I'm okay. Or I'm a good person. I know I'm a good person, right? I don't do anything. I don't injure people. I respect people, so I'm okay. But the sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, covers all aspects of our lives. All aspects of our lives. And when we have his sunnah as the mirror for our souls, then we come to know ourselves that much more intimately. For the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was sent to each one of us personally in order to perfect that which is deficient within us personally. The Prophet was just sent for one reason and one reason alone, to perfect what you already have that's good in you and to make it shine, such that when people look upon you, such that when people are in your presence, they are reminded of God himself. They are reminded of God himself because of how brightly you reflect the attributes of God upon you through following the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, who was the perfect human being, who was the one who perfected those attributes that were upon him. So that when people look upon you, they're reminded of God himself. When people listen to you, they're reminded of God himself. And this is not so difficult to imagine. We can contextualize this all in the words of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, who said that Allah himself said that my servant will continue to grow closer to me through voluntary acts until I love him. And when I love him, I become the hearing with which he sees. I become the sight with which I become the hearing with which he hears. I become the sight with which he sees. I become the hand with which he toils and struggles and fights. I become the leg with which he walks. And this is through voluntary acts of worship, voluntary attempts to draw closer. Voluntary attempts to draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His glorious book, in His majestic book, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. I swear by the soul and the proportion and the order given to the soul, and its own enlightenment as to its wrong and its right, its own enlightenment as to its vices and its virtues. What the soul already knows to be right and wrong. Indeed, he who purifies it succeeds, and he who corrupts it fails. And this is something that is axiomatic. This is something that is shared among all the creation, is an innate recognition of what is right, of what is good, of what is wholesome, of what is pleasing to its Lord. And then comes the guidance to draw the boundaries. So character is already innate in us. The word for character is khuluq, right? Everyone say khuluq. Khuluq, right? Khuluq. Now this is a beautiful word indeed. It comes from 3 letters, right? What are those 3 letters in the Arabic language? Kha, lam, qaf, right? Kha, lam, qaf. And in its verb form, it means what? Khalaqa. He created. And khalq, what's khalq? Creation. So character and creation come from the same 3 letters in the Arabic language. Character and creation. Why do you think that is the case? Character is something that is innate to the human being. It is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, in His creating the human being, infused him with. That in the creation itself, character is part of that creation. A natural propensity or disposition toward the manifestation of good character is something that is natural and inherent in the human being. That with our creation, we have in our DNA, we have character that is encoded. Character. Fitra is another one of these beautiful words, right? This innate nature, right? With character specifically, khalaqa and khuluq, you can see in children, you can look at children as they have, and not even just children, but you look at any like even cats when they have in their litters, right? They'll have 10, 12 cats in their litters. Every one of those cats has a different disposition. There's one cat that wants to cuddle up next to mommy. There's the other cat that wants to fight with its brothers or sisters. There's another cat that's trying to get out of the box and explore what's going on around it. There's another cat that's just jumping up and down. There's one cat that just wants to be alone in the corner, right? What is all of that? It's just the same mother and the same father, right? It's the same mother and the same father. But what is all of this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has infused every one of those kittens and every one of His creation, right, with certain character traits, right, that are innate to that person. Character traits that are innate to that person. So that you have a child who is, for example, very calm, right? You might have his sister who's very feisty, right? You might have one child who's very empathetic, and he'll share everything he has at a table, right? At a meal. Over a meal, if he's eating, he'll share with everyone at the table. And another child who will just scream all day long, right? That's all they do, is just scream all day long. Okay. Now, this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put into these beautiful little babies, right? That has to be nurtured in such a way as to yield good and refined character, right? Good and refined character. It may so be that the child who is sharing everything over the meal has empathy, right? As an adult. Empathy becomes one of those character traits that have become easy for that child, right? Or cooperation, or wanting to assist another person, right? This type of service, right? It might come more natural to that person because from the very beginning they had that character trait. And for the feisty child, competition or ambition, right, might come easier for a child like that, right? So character is something that we are created with. And that's just physiological. But if you look at the Arabic language, what this word means, khalaqa, khuluq, right? It also means nasib. It means nasib. It's a portion. And khaliqa is tabi'a. Khaliqa is what is natural, right? But it is what is a portion to us, right? Khalaqa means to apportion something. Khuluq is apportioned, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given every person their portion of character from the moment they were born. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His majestic book that in the akhirah, that they will have لَيْسَ لَهُم مِّن خَلَاقٍ, that they will not have any khalaq in the hereafter. What does that mean? They won't have any character in the hereafter? Right? It means that they will have no portion of the good of the hereafter. They have no portion of it. So this means that character is a portion to us. Right? It's a portion to us, such that certain character traits come easier than others. But what does that mean about the empathetic child, that he'll never learn how to be competitive and ambitious? What does that mean about the competitive child, that he'll never be able to empathize, for example? And these are not polar opposites, right? But you have spiritual children and you have very calm children. Just in this very simple example. No. It means that certain character traits may come easier, right? Depending on who that person is. But the other character traits are also within reach. That if I, for example, have, or you, for example, have, you have a certain character trait which is courage, right? You have this. If you know one thing about this sister, she's very courageous. But she's not so generous. What does that mean? Oh, this is the way Allah created me. He created me courageous. He didn't create me generous. This is what I was apportioned with. That's Allah apportioned me with that. No. Because certain character traits come natural and other character traits are acquired. They're acquired. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الصَّبْرُ بِالتَّصَبُّرِ وَإِنَّمَا الْخُلُقُ بِالتَّخَلُّقِ. Right? That knowledge is not gained except through the acquisition thereof. And patience is not attained to except by forcing yourself to be patient. And character is not acquired except by exhibiting good character. And if you look at those forms, they're all form fives, right? Ta'allum, tasabbur, takhalluq, which this form number 5, means to exert one's effort in the acquisition of a good quality. That's what form 5 means. To exert one's utmost toward the acquisition of a good quality, right? That's one of the meanings of form 5, right? It's one of the meanings of form 5. Meaning that the other character traits are within grasp, but some of them may need more work. They may need a lot of work for a person to acquire them. And this work entails knowledge and action. Knowledge and action. Imam al-Ghazali says that any disease in the heart requires two approaches. One is through knowledge and the other is through acting upon that knowledge. So a person needs to know what is the true value of generosity, for example. What is the merit of generosity? Who are the generous? Who are the people of generosity? How do these people of generosity reflect the name of Allah Al-Kareem? What did the Prophet teach about generosity? What did his wives tell us about generosity? What did his family tell us about generosity? How do we learn? What do the scholars from that time until now, what do they have to say about generosity? Let me watch a TED talk about generosity, right? So that's the ilm part. That's the knowledge part, right? That's the knowledge part. What about historical figures? You know, American heroes that were known for the generosity, and reading up about all of them, right? And getting our inspiration from people like that, right? People like this 90-year-old man in Florida who keeps going to jail because he refuses not to feed the homeless, because it's against Florida statute in a certain place, I forgot where it was, that to feed the homeless was a felony or a misdemeanor or whatnot, right? And he's out there feeding the homeless. He doesn't care what they write in their law books, right? So let me find out about that guy, right? So that's part of knowledge. That's part of knowledge. And then comes action, right? Action based on that knowledge, where I'm going to now put myself to the task of being generous. And it begins first by refusing to say no. The next time somebody asks me to give something, I will give. That's just my policy until I start working on my miserliness and I start getting over it. And then after a good month or two goes by, the next time somebody asks me to give something, I'll give 10% more of what I would have wanted to give, until you get rid of it. And then, you know, that takes you to another stage where you say, I don't want to come home with money in my pocket, because that's how the Prophet ﷺ was. I don't want to come home I'll never come home with money in my pocket. Even if that means being delayed for another half hour or hour, I'll find somebody in need and I'll give that money to them. And then you ascend. Until now, you become known as a generous person. You become a generous person, right? So that's a character trait you acquired, right? You acquired that character trait. It didn't come naturally to you, but you acquired it through hard work. Okay, so that's about khuluq, right? That's about khuluq. The Prophet ﷺ was described as having the most beautiful character, husn al-khuluq, right? The phrase in Arabic is husn al-khuluq, and husn al-khuluq is such a beautiful term. What is it? It means the beauty of character, right? But there are two words for beautiful in Arabic. What are those two words? Husn, I just gave you one of them. Husn, and what else? Jamal or Jameel, right? Inna Allah Jamilun yuhibbul Jamal. Allah is beautiful, He loves beauty, right? So this word beautiful, right, for Jameel, what is the three letters that make up this word, Jameel? Jim, Mim, Lam, right? Do we know any other words from that? Jamal, right? A camel, right? A camel, right? And camels are absolutely beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا إِلَى الْإِبْلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Don't they consider camels how they were created? Beautiful creatures. Absolutely beautiful. Rude as rude as you can imagine, right? Don't ever FaceTime, right? Go face to face with a camel, he'll spit right in your face, right? They're very, very rude animals, right? But at the same time, just very beautiful. Very beautiful. And basically, the dictionary definition of this jameel or jamal is that which is beautiful according to its proportionality, according to how its symmetry, right? That Allah has a symmetry in His creation, a proportionality, right? That things are in place, things are in order. You can have, and I give this example sometimes, you can have what was it, Fabio, right? That's his name, Fabio? The GQ guy, right? Fabio, right? Who's just this gorgeous specimen of a human being. It's just that long flowing hair, and it's something I could never do with my hair, right? So, just amazing, right? My hair grows big, it doesn't really go long. So I'll never be that guy. Right? Anyway, just imagine if Fabio's hair, his long flowing hair, was growing out of his neck instead. He was just bald and he was growing out of his neck. I'm serious. What if just one side of his neck, right? And on the other, and on one of his arms, right, he doesn't have a hand here on his right hand is actually growing out of his elbow, his left elbow. I'm serious. Imagine that. Imagine Fabio, right, with his right hand growing out of his left, and put his hair back on his head. That's okay. Put his hair back on his head. But just imagine he was just born with his right hand on his left elbow, right? Seriously. Would he be on that? Would you even know his name today? Right? You wouldn't even know his name today. Why? Because the proportionality is off. Right? The symmetry is gone. Right? And we call that, what do we call that? Huh? Well, it's asymmetry for sure. But we have another name for it, right? It's a deformity, and it's ugly, right? It's ugly. And it's a deformity, right? He's deformed, right? He's deformed. He's not formed correctly. Right, and one of the names of Allah is Al-Musawwir, the fashioner, right, who forms. So this form, right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put proportionality and symmetry into His creation, and the divine formula for beauty is the golden section, right? That's the golden section. Is a divine formula for beauty in the creation, right? The Fibonacci code. Right, you guys know about that, right? So, and that's in the minutia, and it's in the grand as well. It's in that which is minuscule and that which is grand, and wherever it is, and it's all throughout the human anatomy. It's all throughout the human anatomy. So, if the eyes are spaced too wide, right, then it falls out of what is symmetrical. It falls out of proportionality. And it's not considered jameel, right? So there's an objectivity to beauty. There's an objectivity to beauty. If the eyes are, you can have Fabio again, right? But what if his eyes were right over his two eyes were right connected to his nose? Just a minor detail, right? Just a minor detail. But what if that was the case, right? He'd lose his contract in a minute, right? He'd lose his contract. Is he still doing pictures of? Never mind. So, right, this is Jamal, right? This is Jamal, right? This is Jamal. Husn, if you look up the word husn in a dictionary, husn, the dictionary definition of a husn, right? The dictionary definition of a husn is ma laysa biqabih, that which is not ugly, right? That which is not ugly. Right? The things are known through their opposites. That which is not ugly. Now what does that mean? That is the subjective dimension of beauty. Whereas Jamal is the objective dimension of beauty, Husn is the subjective dimension of beauty, right? That there's a subjectivity in beauty as well. That is known and it's acknowledged, it's recognized through the soul itself. The soul recognizes that thing for beautiful, whereas the eyes have its own mode of recognition. Because a blind man, don't tell me a blind man doesn't know what beauty is. And he has never seen form. But don't tell me a blind man has no notion of what beauty means. So what is that? What is that based on? Right? So he has an acute sense of what is beautiful, but it's much more subjective for him. Whereas the one who's relying on his eyes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, he's looking at forms, right? And he's relying on an objective reality to beauty. Okay? Now the character of the Prophet ﷺ was described as husn al-khuluq, right? That he had husn al-khuluq. His character was that which left a person utterly speechless. Because that's exactly what husn means. It's that which is not ugly. What kind of a dictionary definition is that, right? How do you describe that as a dictionary? That's a dictionary definition. And it's not because the lexicographer was lazy. He just got lazy with that one word, but he's got volumes of other words that he just, he's just pumping it all out. But when he came to this word, he said that which is not qabih, right? And if you're connected to your fitrah, then you know exactly what that means. But if there's a disconnect from the fitrah, then that which is ugly is beautiful, and that which is beautiful is ugly. And there is no such thing as a divide between the two. It's all one, right? It's all one, and it's all bland. If you're not connected with your fitrah, you will mistaken the ugly for beautiful, and you will mistaken the beautiful for ugly. If you're not connected to fitrah, and if the nafs is just gone wild, you will mistaken the two. And this is I have a very clear example for this for you, if you don't mind indulging me for a second. And this may relate to some of the men much more, right? That at a certain point, for a lot of men, going through our stages of religiosity or whatnot, at a certain point, like let's say in high school or college even, and all the temptations at college, right? You might see a person walking along the quad or whatnot, right? Barely dressed, and have a problem lowering your gaze with such a person. There may have been a certain phase in your life, way back in the days of Jahiliyyah, right? Where a miniskirt would catch your eye, and you would follow that miniskirt with your eyes, and find it very difficult to lower your gaze, right? Until you got to meet some of the Muslims, you started to pray with some of the Muslims, started to recite the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you started to take your deen a little bit more seriously, and you started to lower your gaze, and you got consistent with that. And then summer comes back around, and the clothes get lighter and lighter. They start shedding off like onions, right? The clothes get lighter and lighter, and those same mini skirts walk in front of you, and now you don't have that same temptation you had last year. Now it's much easier to lower your gaze, but you also have a certain way of interpreting that now, where you consider it sort of repulsive. You consider it rather disgusting that a person would leave their home without clothes on. You consider it kind of repulsive. What is that? What is that? And the woman who's dressed modestly, right, very modestly, the woman who's dressed respecting her body, with her you have a problem lowering your gaze. Okay? So what is that? What is that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He says that He has حبب إليكم. He says حبب إليكم الإيمان وزينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان. That at a certain point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made Iman beloved to you, and He has adorned it in your hearts, and He has made disbelief and vile deeds and transgressions repulsive to you. Right? So that beauty shifts in your mind. Beauty has shifted in your mind. What you once found beautiful, you now find ugly. And what you not once found ugly, you find now beautiful. Beauty has shifted for you. So when we come more in contact with our fitrah, with our true natures, these categories they become that much more distinguished in our minds. Beauty becomes beautiful, and ugliness becomes ugly. For the believer, for the faithful person. So going back to husn al-khuluq then, the beauty of the character of the Prophet ﷺ, his beauty was such that it left whomever was in his presence utterly speechless. Utterly speechless. You could be in his presence and he was the most hated person to you before you were there. And then just as he leaves, he's the most beloved person to your heart. And you don't even know what hit you. You don't even know where it came from. You have no idea who was that man? Who was that man? People who are in his presence. Imam Ali alayhi salam said that if you see him from afar, you are in awe of him. And if you intermingle with him, you can't help but fall in love with him. That's what he said. So what is that? Is that not beautiful? It's utterly beautiful. And it's through his character. The character of the Prophet ﷺ was such that if you were in his presence, it left you utterly speechless. Such that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha was once asked, describe the character of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she said, well, why don't you guys try to describe it? Describe the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No, you know the hadith. Describe. But if somebody asks you just on the street, hey, I've heard about Muhammad, describe his character for me. Yeah, but where would you start?
Beyond description.
It's beyond description. But where would you start? Like if you had to give an answer,
Generous.
where would you start?
Just.
Generous, just. I mean, but why start there as opposed to anywhere else?
In the middle, he was not.
You start.
involved.
All of this is correct, but the point that I'm making is with such vast character, you can start anywhere and it would be the same as starting somewhere else. Someone wanted to start with his generosity, someone wanted to start with his moderation, someone wanted to start with his justice, right? Fine, but why start there as opposed to anywhere else to start? Basically, it's like asking you this question: where is the beginning of this circle? Like, where are you going to start? And so Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, utterly speechless. She was taken aback by the question. And she was asked this question several times, right? But she was taken aback. She was taken aback. Like, in a moment, she thought of all the memories she had with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In a moment, she had to, like, his whole life flashed before her eyes in that moment, right? That she was asked that question. And she was utterly speechless. She had nothing else, she had nothing to say. So she chose the one word that gathers all the other words. The one description that gathers all the other descriptions. And she said, Kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an. She said his character was the Qur'an. That's the one word that can accurately describe the character of the Prophet ﷺ, where to begin and where to end. Because the Qur'an is infinite. The Qur'an is infinite. It doesn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end. And what do you say about a man who reflects the names and attributes of Allah upon him in every waking and sleeping moment? His character just flows. And the light of his character flows. And light has no beginning and it has no end. Light has no beginning and it has no end. So for the Prophet ﷺ, she said his character was the speech of God. In other words, his character was the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She said, أَفَلَا تَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنِ? Do you not read the Qur'an? He said, yes, I read the Qur'an. She said, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ. She said his character was the Qur'an. So we talked about character, right? We talked about character linguistically. Now technically, what does character mean, right? Like if you wanted a technical definition, and some of you have your notes out, you have tables out, right, where to write your notes. And I want to give you guys a technical definition of character, right? And this is according to Al-Jurjani in his Mufradat. Al-Jurjani he's one of these people who wrote an encyclopedic, work on technical nomenclature, right? So if you want to know, for example, if you want to know the definition for influenza, you can go to Webster's dictionary or you can go to Apple dictionary, right? And you'll get a 2-3 line definition of influenza. But if you want to go to a medical encyclopedia, it's going to give you a totally different definition of influenza, including when it was first discovered, what the symptoms of it are, how it's treated, what the different strands are, etc., etc. Right? So Jurjani's Mufradat is just like that, and he has a definition for character that's a technical definition, right? That I think will be helpful for us in wrapping our minds around it. So he says, الخلق عبارة عن هيئة للنفس راسخة يصدر عنها الأفعال بسهولة ويسر من غير حاجة إلى فكر وروية. He says that khuluq is an expression, khuluq is a term, it's an ibara, it's a term relating to a predisposition in the soul, deep-rooted, right? Deep-rooted predisposition of the soul, from which actions emerge with ease and facility. From which actions emerge with ease and facility, without any need for forethought, right? Without any need for forethought or premeditation. It is a term relating to a deep-seated predisposition in the soul from which actions emerge with ease and facility without any need for forethought or premeditation. Okay?
Can you please repeat it in Arabic?
عبارة عن هيئة للنفس راسخة يصدر عنها الأفعال بسهولة ويسر من غير حاجة إلى فكر وروية. عبارة عن هيئة للنفس راسخة يصدر عنها الأفعال بسهولة ويسر من غير حاجة إلى فكر وروية. Okay. Everyone get that? So I'll ask you a question, and some of you may have heard me ask this question before. But if someone is, let's say, provoking you, insulting you on the subways, right? You're riding on the subway, or you're riding on the bus. How many people here still take public transport? Right? You're riding on the bus, somebody comes and insults you, right, in your face and everything, and you're thinking, I should take this pie, because obviously you have a pie, and smear this guy's face with this pie, right? Or I should practice my taekwondo on this guy, right, and just do an uppercut to the cheek, right, to the chin. I don't know taekwondo. I'd probably still get an Olympic point for that, though. Or I should just respond right back to him and with every type of slur that I can just release and take all my frustrations out on this guy, right? And you don't do it. You don't do any of that. But you just smile, right? You smile. And you pretty much respond to him by saying what Sayyidina Isa once said, for example. Like, they came to him and they insulted him, one after another, insulted him. And every time they insulted him, they hurled insults at him. He said, Allah bless you, God bless your children, God give you and give your family, God increase you in every blessing. God preserve you and give you long life and health. And one of the disciples said, every time you respond, this guy insults you, you respond with goodness. And so Isa alayhi salam said, a man can only spend from what he has in his pockets. Right? So you had your Jesus moment, right? You had your Jesus moment on the subway, right? And then when you get into your car, right? You get the kiss and ride parking lot, right? You get into your car, you're heading home now. And then there's a guy on the side of the street who's got a sign, right? We'll work for food. And the light's green and you're trying to hit the light, right? You're trying to get to the light before it goes yellow. No cars in front of you. You can see the guy with the sign, but you're trying to get that green light before it turns yellow right? And then God forbid red, and then what? You've got to stop. So you speed up, right? And the light goes yellow. I can still get the yellow light. No, and then the light turns red. You come to a screeching halt. You stop. And you make sure to stop a little bit past the guy. So he's behind you now. Right? Like you didn't even see him. And so you're just looking forward. You get on your phone. None of this is autobiographical, by the way. You get on your phone, right? Act like you're talking to your mother. You know, and you got the phone on this ear so the guy doesn't see you, right? And all of a sudden, the knock on the window. Oh. You start to roll down the window a little bit. And you know what the guy has got his little can there, right? And you start to have this internal conversation. You say, all right, should I give him $1? I usually give dollars when I have dollars. Or should I give him 5? Or should I just say, oh, I don't carry the cash, I just have credit card. He doesn't have a little swipe machine on his iPhone, so I only have credit card, right? Or which excuse do I give him? Or do I reach for the water in my bag and say, hey, I'll give you this water? Or do I so you're starting to have this conversation, right? And then you say, you know what? You pull up the armrest, right? And you pull out $100 bill. And it's not something you've ever done before, but you pull out $100 bill and you put it in this guy's hand and with a smile, and you don't even ask him for dua. You don't even ask him to pray for you, right? Because you want this solely between you and Allah. And you are having a good day. Jesus walks, right? You are having such a good day. And you get home and everything, you're feeling really good about yourself. Can we say that you have good character?
Not according to this definition.
Do you have good character?
Is he,
How many people say yes? How many people say no? How come?
It's not natural.
It's not natural? It's not natural to be nice.
It didn't come with ease.
Exactly. It didn't come with ease or facility. It didn't come without forethought. It didn't come with any of those things. It came only after having this deep internal conversation with your nafs at both junctures, right? You're having this conversation, and yes, you gave the guy $100 bill, right? What else can I do in order to have good character? Well, you can do more of that until it becomes easy for you, so where you don't even have to think about it anymore. Then you have good character. Then you have good character. You keep doing those acts, right? And then you have good character, right? But it's not one deed and you're there, right? This has to be developed over time. It has to be developed over time until it becomes your disposition, right? This is the point that Al-Jurjani is making here, such that the Bedouin Arab comes to the Prophet ﷺ. No, I'll give you one example. He says, no, this is not the Bedouin Arab. There was one of the companions came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said that my tribe has accepted Islam. And I told them that if you do so, you will have no poverty to fear. Poverty will not be your fear. All of your needs will be taken care of, as you told me, Ya Rasulullah. And now they've all said, okay, all right, we're Muslim. So the Prophet ﷺ is hearing this, and he says, I have to give them something that's going to help them in their situation. And there was a Jew who was there who saw in his text that two signs of prophecy. He said, one, that if he is provoked, he responds with forbearance. And the second is what? If he is angered, it only increases his forbearance. If provoked, he responds with forbearance. And if he is angered, if the provocation increases, it only increases his forbearance. So he said, I'll lend you the money, O Messenger of God. I'll lend you the money. Well, he didn't call him Messenger of God. He's just testing him out. I'll lend you the money, and then you can pay me on such and such a date. So they agree. The Prophet ﷺ takes the money, and he gives it to them, and they agree on a date where the debt will be paid. 3 days before the date, the same man comes and he catches the Prophet ﷺ by surprise. He grabs him from the back of his cloak and he yanks the cloak from behind, such that it rips and tears in the front along his neck, leaving red marks on his neck. Imagine somebody doing that to you in the street. Just coming out of nowhere, taking your shirt and yanking it all the way down so that it tears all the way in the front, and it leaves, like paper cuts?
Like rug burn.
Yeah, rug burns, right? All throughout on your neck, right? And Umar radiallahu anhu is right there, and he grabs for his sword. Obviously, he's going to grab for his sword. It's on him. He grabs for his sword. And the man says, I didn't know that the sons of Abdul Muttalib were delinquent in paying back their debts. I didn't know that they were, that they took it so lightly, paying back their debts. And what? It's 3 days before the debt is due. If I was in that situation, I would have said, today's Tuesday, my debt's due on Friday, right? I mean, this kind of and then there's a grace period, right? There's a grace period. But the Prophet ﷺ, when this man yanked his shirt in the back, right? One of the first things I would have done is just went around like this, right? And I, just my natural instinct is, right-handed, you go back like this, and you hope to just clock the guy, right? I don't know who that is, but somebody means business. And if I'm going to throw down, let me throw down. I'll find out who it is later. Right? After he's laying out on the ground, oh, it's you. Let me help you out. The Prophet ﷺ turned to this man, smiling, with a gleaming smile on his face. He turns to this man smiling. That was his reaction. That was his initial reaction. Right? That was his spontaneous reaction. Who is this who needs something from me? Who is this who's, That was his reaction. That is good character. That is good character. And nothing throws you off. And nobody can possibly push your buttons. You don't have buttons to push. That is good character. And then the hadith goes on. It's a long hadith, but he says to the man, and so the man tested him, one in provoking him, and secondly in insulting him and his family. And he saw that the Prophet ﷺ increased in his goodness by saying, he told Umar, who was about to take his sword out of its sheath, he told Umar, take him, and he was a rabbi, by the way. He said, take him to Bayt al-Mal and give him 20 boxes of dates, in addition to what I owed him. So he increased the man as a gift, right? As a gift, and didn't mention one thing about the debt being owed 3 days later. That's character. That's character. That's character. So we're talking about at home with the Prophet, the family life of the Beloved, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So why talk about character? I mean, why spend all this time talking about the perfection of character? What's that? What's the connection between those two? When we hear hadith like the Prophet ﷺ was only sent to perfect a good moral virtue and character, when we hear hadith about his character was the Quran, when we hear hadith about he was the Quran walking, or when we hear hadith about the Prophet ﷺ's character was he was the best of all people in character, in our minds we have placed the Prophet ﷺ in the public realm. How else are we going to know that his character was all of that unless we can imagine him being outside with his companions, outside, on the battlefield, in the marketplace, in the meeting places where they come. When people come to him with their questions and with their problems, he's there solving their problems, helping them through their problems. He's officiating marriages. He's bringing, people are coming with their babies, and he's doing ceremonies with them. He's healing people who are sick. He's taking his companions on a trip here or there. He's engaged in the battlefield, right? This is where we always place the Prophet ﷺ. But who is telling us that his character was the Quran? Who is telling us that he was like the Quran, walking on 2 feet? Who is telling us that he was the best of people in terms of his character? Who is telling us that he was in the service of people? Who's telling us all of that? It's people who never went with him out onto the battlefield, who scarcely went with him on all of these trips back and forth, who were scarcely there as he was officiating this or that thing, who was not in the room when he was solving this or that problem between his companions and different tribes. These are people who were not there in the public, but they were at home. They were Anas, they were Aisha, they were Salama, they were Zainab, they were Al-Hasan, they were Ibn Abbas. They're the people of the Prophet's household, which means that the aggregate testimony that we have as to this man's character is coming to us from those who spent the most intimate time with him and shared the most intimate space. What does that mean? What does that mean? That the testimony of the Prophet's character is not coming from Abdullah ibn Umar, but it's coming from Salama. It's not coming from Abu Hurairah, but it's coming from Anas. What does that mean? That means that when the Prophet ﷺ's character is described, we as listeners to that hadith, we have to start imagining him at home and not outside of the home. Because you and I are scarcely going to fill the Prophet's shoes outside the home. There are very few people among us who are going to be marrying people and divorcing people. There's fewer people among us who are going to be leading armies into battle. There's fewer people among us who are going to be in the marketplace making sure that people are not being cheated from their rights. Why is it that we constantly assume the institutional roles that the Prophet ﷺ played whenever his character is being invoked? And yes, he had impeccable character in public. But you and I both know that it is very easy to have good character in public. You and I both know that it is very easy to be on your best behavior with people who don't have to come home to you and you don't have to go home to them. You and I both know how easy it is to fool other people, such that when they walk away from you and you walk away from them in an interaction, you know the impression that you left on their hearts. You know what they're thinking about you, that mashallah, mashallah. And all the praise that they would have for you if they were to go back and talk about you. You know that I fooled another one today. You know that we have these public, right? These public personas that we have built, and these public lives that we live online, right? These public lives that we live online, where we're constantly broadcasting to the world the very best picture of ourselves that we can, the very best image of ourselves that we can. And to some extent, it's a mask that we wear every time we leave the house. Every time we leave the house. And it is very easy to be on our best behavior with people who do not provoke you, with people who do not test you, with people at Jummah, you're going to get into a fight with somebody at Jummah. You're going to get into an argument with somebody at Panera or at a Starbucks. You're going to actually get into a fight with somebody there. You're going to start arguing. You're going to raise your voice at a park. In a park. You're going to raise your voice against somebody else in a park, or even against your own family in a park. The public domain, there are social pressures in effect in the public domain that prevent us from exhibiting certain behaviors. But what happens when you're at home? Oh, I can be myself at home. I can be myself at home. Right? At home, home is the only place where a man can be himself. Every home is a man's castle, they say, right? The home is a man's castle. Home is where you can kick off your shoes, put up your feet, and just be yourself and relax. From what? From the front. From the front. It takes a lot of energy in public to maintain this, this reputation. But at home with the people who matter most, at home with the people who share your space and your time, at home with the people who, you are not cut off from these people, they are not cut off from you. At home with these people, to have good character with people who know you through and through is the true test of character. It is the true test of character. At home with the beloved, the family life of the Prophet. At home with the Prophet, the family life of the beloved. This title could have been reworded as what? Purification of the heart. At home with the beloved, what does that mean? At home with the beloved, what does that mean? It means purification of the heart. That's what we're talking about. That's why we're talking about the perfection of character. Because at home with the beloved means that. At home with the beloved means to refine one's character because it's refined at home. It all begins at home. It begins at home. And there is a certain degree of schizophrenia, or a split personality, if you will, if we are not on our best behavior with the people at home, but we are on our best behavior with our teachers, with our co-workers, with our peers, with our friends, with anyone outside the home. They know us differently. You may have a certain impression of me, for example. Some of you who have never even met me, this may be the first time you've met me, you may have a certain impression of me. And it's very easy, sitting on this side of a microphone, to be able to project a certain image of oneself. Oh, he's the one behind the microphone, he must be important, he must be special. He must be this, he must be that. And there's all these assumptions that we make about one another. There's all these judgments we make about one another. We're constantly judging. And it's based on status. It's based on how other people treat a person. Say, oh, he must be special, she must be so special. Just look at how they're treating her. Look at how they've received her. Who's that person? Right? Like Imam al-Shafi'i one time, there's a story that's told about Imam al-Shafi'i that he was once in the masjid and he had his legs stretched out in front of him, right? You guys know this story. Some of you know this story. And there was a man sitting there, white beard, really old, just regal, right? Dressed all, exquisitely fine. And, who is this man? Who is this saintly person, right? Who's sitting in front of me? And so Imam Shafi'i brought his legs together, right? He brought his legs together. And this man started to talk. He asked the man to introduce him to talk around. And the man was talking all kinds of nonsense. All kinds of nonsense. And so he said, Al-an hana li Shafi'i an yamidda rijlayhi. He said, the time has now returned for a Shafi'i to stretch out his legs. Right? Because it's very easy to fool one another in public. But you take any one of these impressions that you have sort of forged in your minds about me, for example, and this is not about me, this is about the Prophet ﷺ. And then ask my mother about me. Ask my wife about me. Ask my brother about me. I have one brother. Ask my brother about me. And you say, you put them to a lie detector test too. Say, we just got this polygraph over here, we're just going to ask you a couple questions. That's all. And it's like two different people. I swear to God, I swear to you, on my honor, it is like two different people. every time they have these, every time we try to decide, okay, what's going to be the theme for the next retreat, right? I look into my heart and I say, okay, what do you need now? What is it that you need? So these are very therapeutic for me. And today's the 1 year anniversary of Lanterna's sort of first retreat. It's a 1 year anniversary. It's literally to the day last year, right? If we're looking at the solar calendar. Right? The 1 year anniversary. And I'm exactly where I started. So the whole point of this is that it begins at home. It begins at home. How the Prophet ﷺ was at home is relevant to every single adherent, to every single Muslim who's going to be able to follow the Prophet ﷺ. We can all emulate the Prophet ﷺ in every aspect of his private life. In his public life, very few people can do the things he did publicly. But at home, everyone taps into that, men and women. Everyone can tap into how the Prophet ﷺ was at home. And we are going nowhere on our spiritual paths toward Allah and towards His Messenger. We will get nowhere unless we are obsessed about following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ at home. Even the sunnah in our mind has to become deinstitutionalized. We have to take that word sunnah and we have to take it out of the public realm and put it into the private realm. Because that's where it starts, that's where it begins. A lot of times when we think of sunnah, we think of the outward anyway. We think of the beard, we think of the dress codes, we think of all the brushing of the teeth and all that. That's what we think of when we think of just the word sunnah. It has that baggage right now for us. Right? But whenever we hear that word, we've got to make that shift in our minds and think of the Prophet ﷺ's sunnah privately. How was he privately? And that's why you had all these people, most of them men. I found one narration of a woman who asked Aisha, and they all asked the other wives as well. It's just that Aisha, she's the one who's teaching, right? She's the one. They asked Salama as well, but Aisha, she's the one who's sort of, she's known as being the most knowledgeable about the Prophet ﷺ. So most of them have been men going to Aisha and asking her, how was the Prophet ﷺ at home? How was he at home? Why do you think they asked that question? What's the relevance of that question? Why do you think they would ask that question? Because they share the Prophet ﷺ in the public realm, and like one of my teachers says, 90% of the seerah happens outside. 90% of the seerah happens outdoors. Right? We're cooped up in all these in these four walls, right? But 90% of the Prophet's life happens outside, actually. But why are they so keen on finding out what happens inside? If they're not feeling the disconnect as well, if they're not feeling a certain degree of hypocrisy, if they're not feeling how easy it is on the outside and how difficult it is on the inside, and if they're not needing help and inspiration and a word of advice from Lady Aisha, and one of the women comes to her and asks her the same question. She says, how was the Prophet ﷺ with his wives? She asked Aisha that question. Why do you think she would ask that question? A lot of times, when we talk about the answers of Aisha, that he was in the service of his family, he was in the service of he used to mend his own clothing, and we'll talk about these hadiths tomorrow. What are we thinking? What's the one context in which you hear that hadith? Whenever you hear that hadith, and it's usually someone giving it on the other side of a microphone, he's using that hadith, or she's using that hadith in order to do what? In order to bash men over the heads with that hadith. And say, look at how the Prophet was, right? And look at how you are. Men, right? Why do you think the woman went to Aisha and said, how was he at home? Why did she go to Aisha and say, how was he at home? She didn't ask her, how were you at home? She didn't ask Aisha, how were you at home? But she asked Aisha, how was the Prophet with his wives? Like she's going to have a wife, she's not going to have a wife, but she wants to know how the Prophet ﷺ was with his wives, so that she could take that and bash her husband over the head with it.
Because she wants to be like him.
Because the Prophet ﷺ is her example too. This hadith, how was the Prophet ﷺ with his wives? The last time I checked, the Prophet ﷺ was the example for both the men and the women. So that hadith is equally relevant to women as it is to men. Is he not the example for both the men and the women? It just so happened that most of the narrators of this hadith, most of the people who asked Aisha this question were men, because they wanted to know how can I rectify my situation at home? How can I rectify myself at home? How can I get over this disconnect that I'm feeling? But there was also this woman who went to Aisha and she said, how was the Prophet ﷺ with his wives? Because that's exactly how I want to be with my husband. That's exactly how I want to be with my children as well. That's exactly how I want to be with my in-laws. I want to be like that with my siblings. I want to know how was he in private, because I can also be like him in private. Last time I checked, this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is the example for both the men and the women. So enough with the bashing over the heads of men with this hadith. And yes, we do need to bash some heads of men with this hadith. For sure, right? For sure. But make no mistake about it, this hadith is equally relevant to the women. Right? So we have a lot to share, inshallah, tomorrow and Sunday as well. Tomorrow we'll talk about the art of husbandry. So bring your rakes and hoes. We'll also talk about, on Sunday, we'll talk about what? The flowers of heaven, right? Which is how the Prophet ﷺ described the children. You can describe them all as flowers of heaven. So we'll talk about the Prophet ﷺ as husband tomorrow, and then the Prophet ﷺ as father and grandfather on Sunday, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. This is it's a great honor to be in to have a role in which one can share the beauty of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are very honored to do this work. We are very honored to teach this these beautiful aspects of the majestic life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a place of privilege. It's a place of true honor to be able to share this blessing with the hearts in order for self-purification, inshallah. But I vibe off of you, you guys vibe off of me, and inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. As for the blessing of your Lord, convey that. And what greater blessing than to convey than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.